Extract from Italian Cartomancy, Learn the Vera Sibilla by Alessandra Venturi. Many people see France as the pioneering country of cartomancy. The Marseille Tarot, the Lenormand deck, and Jean-Baptiste Aliette, for example, and the life story of Mademoiselle Lenormand herself. These are all figures that, in popular belief, are associated with France and its connection with occultism and fortune-telling. England too has its own tradition, with the Rider-Waite Tarot and the Crowley deck, both of more recent origin, but still quite famous around the world. Few people realise, however, that the divinatory tradition of cartomancy has even older origins in Italy. For example, Jean-Baptiste Aliette, previously mentioned, was a famous French cartomancer and author on the subject. And in one of his books he admitted that he'd learned the art of fortune-telling with cards from an Italian woman from Guermonte, who taught him to predict the future with an ordinary deck of playing cards. Another example is found in the oldest tarot deck ever published, older than the Marseille Tarot, the Visconti Tarot, created in the 15th century by the Duke of Milan. In Italy, the Catholic Church held, and still does to this day in fact, a dim view of anything outside of its own realm and domain over all things spiritual. This is especially so of cartomancy and fortune-telling, but they are mystic arts that have withstood the test of time through their popularity and the age-old tradition of transmission from mouth to ear. To this day, books on the art are scant, and many are of poor quality. Cartomancy, though, a hidden esoteric tradition by default, was known only to a few men and women. They did not advertise their skills and abilities for fear of ridicule, ostracism, and persecution by the church. Until just a few decades ago, when public opinion in Italy finally started to change, but only slightly, finding a genuine cartomancer was a feat in itself, unless you were fortunate enough to have an association with one of the few families whose knowledge and skill in this area of divination and fortune-telling had been covertly retained down through many generations since its creation. Some people were fortunate enough to find one by word of mouth, and most frequently by sheer chance, usually out of the outcome of a casual conversation with someone whose troubling personal circumstances had been transformed by a little old lady or grey old man with an unassuming manner and a frayed stack of cards. Regardless of the circumstances, the effect would have been the same. Usually a mysterious story of coincidence, unsettling circumstances, and a prediction that came true. These tales of how the events predicted by the cards unfolded, and the vivid recollections of events and circumstances recalled down to the tiniest detail, kept the magic alive. Contrary to modern-day belief, more often than not, these predictions were not made with the tarot, but with playing cards, or more frequently what is traditionally called the Vera Sibilla cards. But what are they? In Italian, these specific oracle cards are called Sibyls, or Sibyllae in the native language. In ancient Roman times, a Sibyl was a clairvoyant priestess who made obscure predictions in riddles and rhymes. That is where the term Sibylline comes from. The word kind of stuck, and it came to represent different decks of cards modelled over the structure of playing cards that were used, instead of the tarot, to predict mundane events with uncanny accuracy. In fact, many an Italian region developed its own traditional fortune-telling with playing cards. However, the most popular deck nationwide has been, and still is, the one named Vera Sibilla Italiana, which translates as True Italian Sibyl. In order to understand how this deck came into being, we must take a step back in time to the 19th century. During that period, there was a need for a different deck to the 32 or 36 cards originally used in France, for example the Lenormand deck. This was because of a desire to expand what could be foretold. They achieved this by creating a larger deck that could incorporate more detail and flexibility, while at the same time catering for the individual and different needs and essence of the Austrian and Italian cultures individually. Austrian decks were created with different imagery and symbolism that they could express more accurately, as you would with a full 52 deck as opposed to 36, and they covered everyday life. The imagery was consistent with what was already popularly accepted, but provided more depth and scope of interpretation due to the increased number of cards available. Once these decks were created, the domination of French cartomancy effectively ended in Europe. You can find out more about La Vera Sibilla and how to read the cards for yourself at ItalianCartomancy.com.